I think we'll get started. So my name is Hillary Kane, and I am the director of FEND, the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. And I'm joined by my colleague, Caitlin Fritz, who is the manager of our K-16 Partnerships Network. And I guess under that larger umbrella of K-16 partnerships, we've been starting to create what we're calling a college success network. So really thinking about what can we do to address the inequities on our campuses in terms of college success and degree completion, particularly for low-income students and students of color. And we realized, hey, we're a network of colleges and universities, like maybe we should be thinking about that, particularly because we're looking at it from the lens of a community issue. Most of our campuses are engaging with K-12 kids, whether they're tutoring, mentoring, STEM programs, arts programs, you name it. And of course, the eventual purpose of all those initiatives is so that kids grow up to be healthy, productive adults. And increasingly, that means a college degree. And yet, if they come to our campuses and don't succeed, what have we actually accomplished in the long run? So under that umbrella, we are starting to do more conversations and convenings, specifically around this idea of degree completion and college success. Back in October, we had a kickoff event where we brought down, or up I should say, Tia McNair from AAC&U, and we convened probably about 75 people from 35 campuses in the region, representing what for FEND is kind of a new audience. So we had directors of financial aid, directors of institutional research, folks from admissions, also from civic engagement, but diversity and inclusion, career services, you name it. So different areas that we feel contribute to student success. And from those folks, we crowdsourced questions and ideas about how we should frame our work. And we basically came up with 4 overarching questions that kind of fit into different buckets. One of them was, how do we make our campuses more welcoming to all students all the time in all places? And so this webinar is really kind of in service to answering that question. And so while we're obviously not going to solve that, answer that question in the next hour, we're hoping to, really start thinking about ways that we can really explore, not just diversity and inclusion, but also equity, anti-oppression, really taking a serious look at our campuses and how students, and not just students, but in particular students, feel on our campus. Are they welcomed? What can we do? And if that's not the case, what can we do about it? So we have looked both far and near for some expertise. And so I'm excited to have Joshua Todd, who is the Executive Director of Oregon Campus Compact, on the call. They have been doing some really impressive and innovative work in Oregon with their cohort of campuses. And then we'll also hear from Jeanette Chen, who is closer to home here in Philadelphia and has been working with FEND for a couple of years now, doing some great training for some of our AmeriCorps Vista cohorts and now others. And we'll explore that model as well. So I think because we kind of have a small group, we wanted to go around the virtual room and just hear who folks are, what campus you're from, your role, and then we will turn it over to Josh and officially get started. So I guess if people could unmute themselves for the next minute or so, that would be great. And then we will kick it off. So, Tracy?
Okay, sure. So my name is Tracy Bartholomew, and I'm work in the provost office at University of the Arts, and I'm the director for learning assessment and also the director of our Center for Teaching and Learning. And the reason that I popped onto this call today is because I'm interested in finding out what other campuses are doing around supporting faculty to support more inclusive and equitable environments for their students.
Great. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right. Christina?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Rodriguez. I'm representing the LEMFest Center as the Family Engagement Coordinator. I just joined this team as a path in my own educational journey and professionalism. And pushing diversity within K to 12, but going past that, I wanted to connect with other resources or opportunities to hear what you all have to say, to see how the LimFest Center as a large organization can fit into that, and see what opportunities we can bring into the Hunter Park community as we work to revitalize this community.
Great. Well, thank you for bringing a community-based perspective to our conversation today.
Absolutely.
Bridget.
Hi there, my name is Bridget Scanlon. I currently work at Temple University in the School of Business. I just started a couple weeks ago in a new role. I'm working with undergraduates on their professional development. And I'm also going to be working on helping to revamp our curriculum for all students in the business school as they envision their professional futures. As somebody starting at a new university, I'm just hoping to learn what resources are available and hoping to ensure that our curriculum is inclusive for the students that we have.
All right, Jennifer, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, or Sherry.
Can you hear me? This is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer DeSuze. I am the Director for Inclusion and Diversity Access Programs at St. Joseph's University. I run a pre-college program, so I interact with the 9th through 12th grade population, but also I work with undergraduates through graduation, so I'm always interested in finding out what other schools and organizations are doing to make campuses more equitable and for students to find their sense of belonging so that they make it through to graduation.
Fabulous. All right, and then Sherry, I think you're the last one. I don't know if you're able to take yourself off mute. I can Google and introduce Sherry for us. Sherry is the Associate Director for Student Financial Services at University of the Arts. So that's great. So welcome, glad UArts has a strong team today. Okay, well, we're gonna turn it over to Josh. So I think, Josh, you can take over as host and share the screen, and we're gonna put ourselves on mute and we will go from there.
Awesome. Hey everybody, thanks for being here. Before I started, I just wanted to acknowledge that our offices here at Campus Compact of Oregon sit on the ancestral lands of the Multnomah and the Clackamas and other Chinookan people who made their lives along the Columbia and Willamette rivers, and that we recognize the damage that colonialism and genocide have done to those communities, but how they still are strong leaders here in Portland, in our region, and we thank them for being caretakers of this land and the air and the water since time immemorial. So land acknowledgements and acknowledgements of how we've become what we are, whether that is, how we became Temple, how we became University of Arts, how we became Oregon, are central to some of the work that we do here. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that work. We are, Campus Compact of Oregon, if you're not familiar with Campus Compact, is a presidential membership organization. We have 24 presidents in Oregon who've signed on. And nationally, Campus Compact really supports the development of community engaged pedagogy. We're some of the early adopters and kind of pushers of the service learning framework. And in Oregon, we have kind of taken that historical mission and built on it based on a belief that no matter what the work is you want to do, whether it's in the business school or in the arts or in human resources, no matter what you're doing, you won't be as successful if you're not looking at the historical pervasive racial inequities that exist within this context, this country. And so we still engage in community-based learning and service learning, but we do it specifically through a racial justice lens. And most of the work we do with our campuses now actually centers more on how to create a more inclusive campus, how to create a sense of belonging, how to infuse anti-racist and anti-colonial kind of practice within curriculum. So that's kind of who we are. 4.5 years ago, actually 5.5 years ago, we started a learning community for our AmeriCorps members. They wanted to talk more about anti-racism. They wanted to talk more about equity and what they could do within their service here. And we built out a learning community for them that was very powerful, that they thought was significant. But what they said to us was, this actually made things harder, because while it was transformative for me, I came back into these systems where they were serving at colleges and universities with supervisors who didn't share the same language, the same lens. And so they really struggled sometimes with their supervisors. And they said, what you really should do is you should do this for them and for folks in higher ed. And that's how the ELSI was born. It's the Executive Learning Series on Equity and Empowerment. And I just want to acknowledge a few people. There's, let me see here, my desktop. I'm going to share that. So you should be seeing my desktop. I just wanted to name these people. Nope, you're not seeing my desktop. Just a second. Do you guys see that now? Should be some. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
No? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I was still seeing myself, so I got confused. These are my colleagues in the work, and I just wanted to bring them into this space. Sonali Sangeeta Balaji is our co-facilitator. She actually developed Oregon's first equity lens, and so it's a specific continuous improvement tool that institutions can use to help interrogate their practices, their processes, their programs, using critical questions. She says, her quote is that organizations move in the direction of the questions they ask. And so she provides a whole series of critical questions. And you can find it by just Googling Equity and Empowerment Lens, Multnomah County, MULTNOMAH. Multnomah County. That's where she was working at the time it was developed. It was the first of its kind that really looked at how do we apply equity principles and practices to a large bureaucracy, which was our county government, which is the largest beyond the state, is the largest local government in Oregon. So thanks to her. And then Mila Buckland, my coworker, who helps really organize a lot of the training and learning for our teams. So I just wanted to show you all that. And really the way the assumptions that we've built into the ELSI are that we believe that work happens more powerfully when it is top down and grassroots up. And so we have, and it is stronger when it is done in collaboration. And so the Executive Learning Series is a cohort of up to 8 institutions. We've run it now 4 years. And we require that at least one of those people be at the vice provost, vice president, or presidential level. And then at least one person has to be student facing. And what we ask them to do is it actually starts in the application. So in the application, which is here, and I can send out copies of this, as a team, colleges and universities come together and they do an organizational assessment, which was created by our Coalition of Communities of Color, that has them look at all of these domains around, have we started working? Do we have plans to do this? Are we beginning to put things in place, or has this become part of our routine? In all these different areas, organizational commitment, their leadership and governance. They ask questions about, what's your public commitment to racial equity? We have them think about their workforce competencies, how they train their workforce. We have them think about organizational climate, culture, communications, everything from that to workforce composition and quality, as well as how they collaborate with community. What do their community partnerships look like? And then as place-based institutions, what about resource allocation, contracting practices? So all of that is happening in the application process. And then we bring people together over a year. It's about 50 hours of professional development. They meet for 5 full days. And then in between those, they meet in webinar for about an hour and a half. And we're, doing everything in the beginning from just providing the language of, what is the process of colonialism? How has that impacted the creation of higher education? How is that informed by white supremacy culture? What is anti-racist practice? As well as infusing a all throughout, and this is a really critical part of our model, is a deep belief in the power of mindfulness in this work. And so from the very beginning, we are infusing mindfulness practices, meditation, journaling, reflective practice throughout all of our engagements, because we really believe that, you know, we are not able to change something that we are moving faster than. We have to be able to slow down, really see it, really understand our reactions to it, and then be able to change how we behave in the moment because we have a deeper understanding of what's coming up for us. So much of our reactions, anytime we're reacting quickly, working out of the status quo, working out of business as usual, will be perpetuating white supremacy culture, because that's at the foundation of all of our organizations. And so that's the process that we take them through, is kind of building their understanding, and then it's on an academic year. So usually by about January, they begin thinking about projects that they would like to apply an equity lens to. And we work with them to develop their project. And campuses have done everything from overhauling their recruitment. One institution, a Hispanic serving institution, decided to revamp their touch points with their Latinx students and families from application to orientation. And they looked at that whole process and began asking more critical questions. We've had campuses work on, and it's not just campuses, we actually have some government agencies and nonprofits that have participated as well, but looked at, you know, hiring practices. Or we had one institution that's been through it 3 times that sent 1 year all faculty, and it was just focused on curriculum and how do we apply an equity lens to curriculum. So over the last 4 years, we've had 18 different institutions, many of those going through multiple years with different focuses, and about 200 professionals over the 4 years, and about 17 presidents have been leading their teams. And what some of the impacts that we've begun to see, we use something called the Intercultural Development Inventory. It's a assessment of individuals' intercultural competence. We've seen increases in the intercultural competence of members of the cohort. We've seen elimination of really negative behaviors like polarization, which is where you see something different and you immediately judge it as bad, completely eliminating that from cohort members. But we've also seen kind of more qualitative things, institutions hiring the very first director of equity when they've never had one, or reorganizing their service learning and multicultural affairs office into kind of one functioning unit that looks at what is our connection to community broadly. So there's kind of stories throughout. We're actually not doing an LC next year. We are kind of modeling and practicing our own lessons. And so we're taking a contemplative year and taking a year off from the LC to really engage with our 4 cohorts, hear about what really impacted them, reflect on how the program model might need to shift or the curriculum might need to shift. And I did want to show one quick thing. So we also have tried in our attempts to model the work that we really believe in, we've tried to do that with all of our work. So we actually took our regular curriculum, which is like an Excel spreadsheet, and here's this day and this day, and here's what we're going to cover. And we tried to create what we call a decolonized curriculum. And so this is the decolonized curriculum. This is the kind of graphic version of what we do with the Executive Learning Series. And it really looks at kind of 4 key areas. What do we do that's life-sustaining? How do we make sure that we are in this work and able to sustain ourselves in this work? What do we do that's deconstructing, so helping us understand the way systems function? What do we do that shifts our consciousness and allows us to see things differently? And then what do we do that's allowing us to become what we want to see? And in each of those areas, we've tried to depict what at the roots, what are some of the things. So in deconstructing, we talk about the history of race and racism, colonialism, white supremacy culture. But in life sustaining, we're engaging with breath and mindfulness. We're talking about living systems and belonging and wholeness. We're in shifting consciousness. We're thinking about data analysis We use the equity and empowerment lens. We talk about transformation versus transaction. And then in Becoming, which is generally towards the end of the series, they're applying the equity lens. We're integrating the arts. We're ensuring that people understand that this is a lifelong process of learning and growing. So it's not just this 1-year infusion and then they're done. So this is all available on our website. You can it's OregonCampusCompact.org, and it's under REACH, which is our racial equity across college and high school. But you can go there and learn more. So it's under the LC. I'm just going to stop for now. I'm sure we can talk more. There'll be questions, but I wanted to leave time for Jeanette as well. So that's just an overview of what we've been doing for the past 4 years and the kind of model and impacts that we have been having in this kind of cohort-based application of equity and anti-racist principles. So thanks.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Jeanette, let's talk about SEED.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I'm going to share my screen. I'm a little bit technologically challenged. So let's see if this works. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, it is working.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so, oops, that's the last slide. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first thing, I'm going to just do an overview of SEED and the structure, and also a little bit about my experience with it so far. And then I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the elements of SEED, and then I'll end with what I think makes SEED really unique and impactful. So SEED stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. It's a peer-led professional development program that creates conversational communities to drive personal, organizational, and societal change towards greater equity and diversity. So SEED essentially uses storytelling as a way to connect our lives to one another and to society at large by acknowledging systems of oppression, power, and privilege. It was founded in 1987 by Dr. Peggy McIntosh, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. She wrote the seminal article, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, about white privilege. And part of that program was doing a New Leaders Week. And so there have been 33 years of this so far. This summer, there are 3 separate cohorts of new leaders. And these are basically people come to the New Leader Week and they become SEED leaders. And then they have the expectation that they will take this knowledge back to their communities and then lead a full year of SEED with their own cohort. So generally, educators, nonprofit leaders, community members, teachers, they're the ones that attend New Leaders Week, and they're usually sponsored by their school or institution because there's a cost associated with attending the New Leaders Week, and the expectation that they will then lead SEED with their school or institution. The structure of SEED is generally monthly 3-hour seminars for about 12 to 15 participants for the academic year. And sometimes that fluctuates depending on availability. Say, we've had parents come to the New Leaders Week and they want to lead a group of parents, and sometimes parents can't do 3 hours a night for a month. So they might do an abbreviated version or do like a full day immersive SEED experience. So that's really up to the SEED leader to decide what makes sense. And also there is a pretty extensive national SEED network. If you look here, we have more than 2,700 educators, partners, and community leaders and professionals who are all SEED leaders in 42 states and DC. And we also have 15 countries outside of the US with SEED leaders. And the green states are the ones that SEED seminars have happened in. So we may need to do some targeted recruitment at these states. So just to give you a little bit of background of my experience doing SEED, I was trained as a SEED leader in 2016, and I found it really life-changing. The organization I was working for, After School Activities Partnerships, which actually works with the LenFest Center, so it's really cool. They sponsored me to attend the New Leaders Week, where I was trained to be a SEED leader, and then I led 2 years of SEED at After School Activities Partnerships. And it was really transformative for us as an organization, not just in rethinking about how we serve the youth in our community, but also how we how we treat each other and how we work as a team, how we address organizational dynamics and power dynamics. So it was very transformative. And we also learned a lot about each other because we were sharing so many stories. And so after my first year of SEED, I had been talking to Hillary Kane, and I have to give kudos to one participant, RJ Tischler, who was a Philly fellow at ASAP, who basically vouched for SEED to Hillary, saying, look, this has been a really great program for me. I think the other FEND fellows would really like this. And so the next year we did 1 year of SEED with the FEND fellows cohort, which was about 12 AmeriCorps Vistas. And then we did another year this year. And then we also did a few week-long intensives with the Gear Up coordinators. So Caitlin is the one that leads them. And then we also did a week-long intensive with the AmeriCorps School-Based Vistas. And I've also done a fair amount of one-off workshops with local nonprofits like Big Brothers Big Sisters, the art department, and participated in some of the school district professional development days. And Hillary and I are collaborating together for a mini series of SEED with campus leaders through a mini grant from the Campus Compact New York, PA. And I put all this here not to brag, but more to show how one person can have quite a wide impact through SEED, and how SEED can be a very empowering thing where, I was a person at ASAP, I was maybe mid-level in terms of organizational power, but I was able to work with my colleagues and have a pretty great impact on the people around me. So I think that's a really special element of SEED, is that it doesn't require someone to be incredibly powerful to have a lot of power. The core elements of SEED are experiential activities, personal testimony, inclusive pedagogy, systemic thinking, and curriculum as window and mirror. And I always like to start with curriculum as window and mirror because we bring everything back to windows and mirrors. So a window is something that provides you perspective into an experience or an identity that's unfamiliar to you. And then a mirror is something that reflects your experience or identity. So oftentimes when we're sharing stories, we will go around in serial testimony around a circle. Each person will have maybe 1 to 2 minutes of time that belongs to them to share their story. And then we will go around again and reflect on what are the windows and mirrors that you see in each other's stories. So it's a way of interacting with others and honoring each other's stories, while also considering how you are connected to each other through these windows and mirrors. And here's just a little bit of a more extensive breakdown of the core elements. I'm not going to go into it too much because we don't have a lot of time, but we have experiential activities, personal testimony. This could take the form of journaling, popcorn sharing, pair sharing. Sometimes I find participants like to share stories about their students more than their own stories, or they would talk about their friends' stories. But I always encourage them to bring it back to their own story, because SEED is really about unpacking your own experiences and starting the learning from within that experience. In terms of inclusive pedagogy, we use the Courageous Conversations Compass and encourage everybody to speak from the heart and to recognize that you really are the authority of your own experience. We also talk a lot about who's missing from this story, who's missing from the room, what are some of our blind spots because of our identities. And we bring in books, media, videos from voices who aren't represented in the room. We also do a fair amount of affinity groups. We do racial affinity groups, we do gender affinity groups, and we really focus on the idea of our stories as history. For systemic thinking, we always are intentional about connecting our story to the systems of oppression at play. So we'll talk about how this personal story relates to the oppression of sexism, or how this story relates to the oppression of racism, or heteronormativity, and we talk a little bit about the nuance of these different systems of oppression and the ways in which they intersect. And I always put be cautious of oppression Olympics, because we're not trying to prove like either person is more oppressed than the other. We're more looking at the ways in which our stories connect within all these systems of oppression. And then of course we bring it back to windows and mirrors. What were the windows and mirrors for you? So I'm sorry, I'm gonna minimize this. So I think what makes SEED really unique and impactful is that it empowers individuals within organizations to facilitate the organization's professional development. I think that the SEED model really believes that it's people within organizations, they understand the organizational dynamics and have the greatest possibility to change it, rather than an outside consultant coming in one time. SEED also really addresses power dynamics. I had this moment at the first Campus Compact session with Hillary and all the campus leaders, where everyone in the room they're all high-level leadership. And I shared that, I'm feeling the power in this room. It's making me anxious. But then I also shared that, SEED is about reframing how I understand power. And I'm part of this work as well. And for me, it's reframing who I understand to be the authority, who I understand to be a carrier of knowledge and wisdom, and to honor myself as someone who can be an authority of my own experiences, and be confident in the ability to facilitate. SEED also elevates the voices and stories of those in the room, and we honor our own stories as well as the stories of others. It's a lot of identity work, a lot of heart work. It's also an ongoing process. So because they're able to come back every month for 3 hours, you have time to process and time to come back. And it also reinforces the idea that this work isn't just a one-time shot. You're cured of racism. It's an ongoing thing of unlearning and unpacking all of our experiences and all of the systems and institutions that reinforce white supremacy and all of the oppressions. And then the last point, the seeds sprout, grow, and expand. So I think of myself as a seedling that has grown and expanded, and I've also seen that in the participants in my cohorts who have gone on to use SEED in all aspects of their work, or who have taken the initiative to lead these mini SEED sessions or conversations with their colleagues. So it's very inspiring and empowering, and particularly with the AmeriCorps Vistas. They're placed at organizations around Philadelphia, and they're only there for a year, but seeing them with SEED tools has made me feel, has shown that they really feel empowered to have an impact on the team that they're a part of, and they feel valued, and their voices are heard. So it's been a really heartwarming process. Yeah, and then I think the next slide is just, I have some testimonials here that I wanted to share. So the first one here is a testimonial from a participant of color. And I like to share this because I feel like oftentimes these diversity and equity workshops can be very exhausting for people of color. And so that's why I always make sure to have affinity groups, because it's a place where people of color can really come together and work on their own work that moves beyond just explaining things to others and trying to validate their experiences. So you can see she says, there was still so much pain behind both that I will continue to unpack and process. And then this testimonial below is from a white participant. And I really liked this testimonial because she says, I feel a much more powerful sense of white responsibility. And it showed me that she is considering whiteness as a system, and also her role as a white person within that system. And that it was also an empowering moment, because she realized that, with great power comes great responsibility. And then this last testimonial is one from Justin Ennis, who is the executive director at ASAP. And he talks about how SEED had an effect on the organization as a whole, but also for himself in a personal way. So I wanted to share that as well. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. So we definitely want to open up for dialogue and Q&A, and then of course wrap up with some conversation about how we might take perhaps elements from both of these, different models and create something new here in the Philadelphia area. So, but first I just want to open it up for questions. So this is the time to unmute yourself. And if you're having technical issues and can't unmute, feel free to put your questions in the chat box. So thoughts, comments, etc.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Hi, this is Christina speaking. Miss Jeanette, how you doing? I just wanted to say thank you. Well, first for shouting out the LymphFest, and I appreciate that. I'm sure we can touch base more. But you have my wheels turning. So I'm working with the families that we serve. And again, we're in the Hunting Park community, K through 12, working on adult programming as well. But I'm working with the families to create a group called Families in Action. And with that comes different interest groups where the families can come together to focus on different parts of programming that they can support. For example, we have different plots out front for a garden or volunteering with our activities that already have facilitators. But now I'm thinking maybe an interest group could be testimonial based, just to build that community feel. And for us in this community, because it is African American and Latino, that's part of our culture, sharing stories, and we've learned that way. So again, I really appreciate what you share with us about SEED, and I'm curious to learn more and see how we can bring these practices to the LymphFest Center.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think one of the parts I really love about SEED is that you don't ever have to worry about not having answers, because the questions are all about the stories that you carry. So a lot of times I'll ask questions like, when was the first time you became aware of your gender? Or when was the first time you became aware of your race? And then describe that moment from the present tense as though you're in it. Describe how you were feeling. And these are all questions that the answer is within us. It's not in a book. It's not a theory. It's very much our lived experiences. And I think that's really powerful. I guess let's talk.
Yeah, yeah. I think it helps remind us that we are human, especially with the technological advancements that have been happening and will continue to happen. And job displacement is going to be a growing epidemic. Reminding that we do have these commonalities and making sure that we build on our relationships as people would be key.
Great. Other thoughts, comments, questions? So Josh, I'm interested in hearing your reaction to hearing about the SEED program that we've been doing and how much it relates or is completely different from the type of conversation and curriculum that you guys have done with ELSI. And you're still on mute.
I was thinking about that a lot. Yeah, no, actually, I really love the way that the SEED model is really meant to it's like community organizing, really. It's taking this small group of people and kind of expanding the circle of concern, which I think is a lot of what we do as well. I mean, it's been a recognition that, these teams that are working, something we may take from the SEED model is building in kind of more of a commitment once you go through this, like, what are you committing to? Because a lot of times folks who are in the work and are given time to kind of focus, once that time is then gobbled up by other things, it's just part of the way that the system works that, people are stretched super thin. And usually these efforts are the ones that are less prioritized unless it's in your title and you were hired to do it, right? It gets stuck in this area within colleges, universities, and even nonprofits where, there's the one person that does it. So I love this idea of kind of people to people on an individual level, taking the folks who know the system and then using them to transform it. I think that is great. It's something that we have actually struggled with and we're wanting to work through in our contemplative year, which is how do we change our program model to ensure that after the year of ELSI, that cohort is still able to work together to create, new champions to really be pushing the work beyond where it's at during their first year. So I really love that part of the seed model. It's beautiful.
Cool. So one thing that struck me is that what you're doing in Oregon is obviously the lens is really the institution, changing the institution. And Jeanette, maybe I'm mischaracterizing, but despite the fact that, the idea is to change organizations and schools, and I'm sure some have, and obviously Justin's testimonial at the end, indicates that, at least the way we've been doing it so far, is still very much sort of focused on individuals. And I'm just wondering how we might kind of, take elements of both and, sort of like get to a place with Seed where we're really challenging folks to, not only change and grow as individuals, but then apply that to their institutions. And perhaps, like the cohort model that they have in Oregon is really, one way of possibly doing that. So, and I guess it's not really more of a question for Jeanette or for Josh, but also, I would love to hear from the folks on the call about whether or not you think something like this would be of interest at your institution. Where might this go?
I think for me, it's got to be a both and. I mean, I think too often racial equity efforts are only focused at the individual level. And I think there is a really critical reason for that. I think it's important to recognize that that we need to change hearts to be able to change systems. But I think there's also a way, and what we've chosen to do is try and break down hierarchy by requiring that folks that have the institutional authority to create change are on the same team with people, sometimes students, or at least folks who understand the lived experience of students, who are focused on, based on this personal learning and journey you've been on, what is an area that you think your institution needs to shift? And so it's these people going through kind of the heart change that then are applying the head and the thinking to the way the institution functions. And that's where the project-based work comes in, is getting them talking together. And we've had some really amazing moments where, I have a president who's saying, oh, we just instituted this new practice and it's this, this, and this, and it's the best thing ever. And, there's a student-facing employee that has been building trust with, this team over, at this point, probably 7 months, that says that's what we wanted it to be, but that's not actually how it's happening on the ground. And so it was this ability for them to come together and use the questions and tools to say, okay, well then that was our goal. What do we need to change to really achieve that? So I think looking at hierarchy and then looking at the ways that people can take heart and individual change and push it into the way institutions change is critical.
I guess I'm sort of echoing Josh, that I feel like it is a combination of personal and institutional buy-in. I think that it's hard to nail down a specific answer because like a moving target. For me, I think it should be really an ongoing process of reflection and evaluation, because the work's going to change depending on how the individuals change and how the students change, and there's no cheat sheet and there's no cheating tool that's going to last forever, so we're always going to have to update it and keep doing the work. But I definitely think that institutional buy-in is critical. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Great. Other thoughts, comments from all the higher eds around the table, so to speak?
And community partners.
Yes, though Christina has definitely chimed in. And everyone is still on mute, just in case you don't realize that.
So this is Tracy from UArts. Thank you for the presentations. They are really very valuable and very inspiring. And we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force here that formed last fall. And I'll just speak for my own experience doing this work, I think we are coming to the realization that we need to do some really comprehensive, in-depth training at all levels within our institution. I think our initial idea was, at least from my perspective in terms of doing faculty development work, that, you know, we could bring people in and do some workshops, but we quickly realized that that doesn't do it. The personal work needs to happen, obviously, and then you need to build in structure and accountability and support at all different levels in order to sustain that. So I do see it as a very long-term process, but a very critical process. And so I think where we are now, having this realization, is where do we go from here? Where do we start? Where do we get the resources to do this? We've identified some training opportunities around the country, but they fill up really quickly. And, you know, who do we send? I mean, we just have all these questions. So this has been I'm doing sort of information gathering at this point to see, you know, what exists, and something local would be great, because I think that would enable more of us to attend and form a team and continue to do this work on a continual and systematic basis. So, I mean, I think our institution would definitely be very interested in seeing something like this rolled out locally that we could participate in and contribute to. But again, I'm just kind of speaking for me, but that's kind of my perception of doing this work and talking with others on my campus.
Great, that's really helpful.
This is Jennifer, and I'm at St. Joe's, and similar to what Tracy just expressed, we're in a time of lots of change. We're looking for a new chief diversity officer. We're talking about trainings, and I'm excited. So I thank both of you for presenting today. Both of your models are so intriguing for the things that can be done, especially if there are more initiatives, you know, collaborating with other institutions, so that, you know, as a community, we become stronger, not just each individual institution, because I believe a lot of us are going through the same things. And it would be great to learn from one another and share stories. But I know that it's really difficult sometimes to have that buy-in. So I'm hoping that here, once I, you know, share with some of the things I've heard on this call, that we're able to institute some of these programs here at St. Joe's.
Great. So yeah, I mean, that buy-in question is really something that really, when I first learned about what the LC model in Oregon, I was like, wow, they're getting presidents and provosts to do this? Like, how did they? Because one of the comments that we had, I know at the October 30th kickoff that we had, was, you know, we basically had a table of, you know, diversity affairs folks and multicultural affairs, and, you know, and not surprisingly, most of those are people of color, most of them are women of color. And they all sat around the table and were like, you know, we get it. You know, how do I convince the person I report to and the person who they report to that this you know, like, it's not just in one little building where we have, oh, that's where, you know, you can feel comfortable as a student, but how do we get this across the campus and really get high level leadership to buy in? And so, you know, I'm flattered that Jeanette thinks that the group that we have meeting is so high level and powerful, but, you know, oh wait, there's more, there's deeper levels. So I'm just curious, Josh, what your experience has been in really convincing, and obviously you just made it a requirement, but the fact that you made it a requirement and people are still doing it, especially with a, you know, really deep questionnaire that will take that's not an easy application. And so, and yet you've had, you know, year after year after year, people, you know, paying to do this. And so I'm just curious, like, you know, if there's any special tricks or what you think the motivation is, or, you know,
I mean,
what your
so, yeah, I mean, this is probably, when I say this, people will be like upset because they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we can't do it. In Oregon, we do have some really unique supporting factors. So we have a statewide equity lens approved by our Department of Education. We have a series of governors who have prioritized the success of students of color, first-generation students, and rural students, both in their talking points, but now in the way that we fund higher education. So higher ed institutions, public higher ed institutions, actually receive a higher reimbursement rate for a student of color or a rural student or a first-gen student who graduates than they do for kind of traditional age students whose parents went to college. And so, I mean, those are significant factors. So, you know, in Oregon, presidents were thinking about this and were looking for ways to do something. So there is some supportive legislation. Having said that, there is still a critical case to be made, you know, and we've got slides we can share, but when you look at the demographics of the college-going student body and you look at it historically and you look at it into the future, institutions that are not doing a good job of supporting students of color and helping them find a sense of belonging and success are not going to succeed. They will not be able to sustain themselves. And so if we can't win them over on the moral argument, we win them over on the business argument, which is you are the most important person to set the tone, maybe not the most important person to do the work, but if you're on your team, it sends a message. And if you're not, it sends a message. And so we have used the business argument for folks that if you're worried about retention, if you're worried about enrollment, if you're worried about you know, recruitment, you have to be looking at equity. Otherwise, you're 20 years behind the game. And the other thing I will say is that we do now have 17 presidents who've been through the LC community college, 4-year private. So we also have the ability, like if people are, you know, starting something up and you're wanting to get buy-in, a lot of presidents know each other. So call me, let me know, and I'll be like, hey, yeah, you should have Andrea Cook, the president at Warner Pacific University, talk with them, or have Jessica Howard, the president at Chemeketa Community College, talk to them, because they can talk about the importance of the president being there and at the table. And happy to use those networks to kind of support the work that's happening in other places.
I just had a quick comment to respond to Tracy's sharing about UArts and starting from the ground up. So I think that sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming because there's so many models and lenses and work that's being done. And so I think it really is up to the team itself to decide what makes sense to have as a framework of which you work from. And one example of this is, so I'm an associate director of the Civic House at University of Pennsylvania, and we have a social justice framework. So I'm gonna hold it up. And this social justice framework was developed by a combination of students, staff, and community partners. And it was a collaborative effort. And we decided what was important for the students and what was important for the mission of the Civic House in general. So I think it's not like one model or one effort is going to cure all. So I think that I would encourage thinking about it, what it means for you and like what your goals are as an organization, as an institution, and what it means for the community around you.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So it's 1:57, at least here on the East Coast. So any other final thoughts, comments? I mean, certainly I think from our end, we're going to continue to explore this. And, you know, Tracy, Jennifer, anyone, if you are interested in, you know, putting your heads together with us to come up with something. And then Josh, I know you said you would send out your application and let us know how much we can shamelessly steal from it versus not. But yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly committed to continuing this conversation and figuring out what might come from it.
I'm just going to add one thing, having been through the CE training with Jeanette, with our Garrett coordinators that are at different campuses, including St. Joe's. So Jen, we can have a conversation. But I think one of the most important things that I took away from that was, you know, I came into it thinking, you know, we are folks on campuses that then work with college students, and we wanted to I came into thinking I wanted to improve our team's ability to work with the college students on making sure that they are in the right mindset going into the Philadelphia schools we're working in. And what I came out of it realizing is that, you know, we needed to work on ourselves first a lot. And I think something that happens too often is that there's like some kind of pass that's made for folks like, oh, you're in the good, you're the good people that do the good work, that do the community facing piece. So, it's not you that need the work, it's the other people. And I think what was really important about, and it really, I think, was a huge learning moment for me, kind of still, learning my ways of managing people and managing staff in some ways, is like how much we needed to kind of look at ourselves as a team. It was very, very valuable. So shout out to Jeanette and the great work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, I'm still going through SEED for the first time, though bizarrely I'm sort of doing it 2 times over. I'm doing it here at work with Jeanette, and then my kid's school put it out and said they're doing it's a version for parents and teachers with a neighboring school in the same community, and that has been also really interesting. And then I discovered that it's not just Jeanette who's trained. There's like a whole network of people, apparently 3,000 over 30 years. So yeah, it's been really a fascinating journey. So I guess I'll wrap it up. It's 2 o'clock. I just want to thank everyone for your time, and particularly Josh and Jeanette. So thank you. And yeah, let's just stay tuned. There will be more to come. And I see a chat from Christina for a final thought. Keep in mind who is at the table for sure. Students, families, or individuals from the communities served need a clear communicated platform for input in matters that affect them directly.
Agreed.
Amen to that. Mm-hmm. All right.
And we'll send out notes and, links to stuff and resources, to everybody to attend it, and in the next college newsletter. So,
Exactly.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.